Alrighty. So again, what we talked about earlier in terms of finding the center of the image, what I'm doing is taking my 24-inch ruler and marking both corners. See how that's that actually didn't come up that well. Let me try a darker pen. Sharpies to try this one. That's better. So I'm going from the top left to the bottom right. Okay. You can kind of see right in that area. I'm going to zoom in slightly so we can talk a little bit about the numbers first. Kind of see right in this area is where the center of the eye, the drawing will be. So I know that's where the eye will be. I'm going to take my other corners. Again, if the image is blurry, let me know. If my camera gets off skew, just feel free to make a shout out and say, Ayad, this I can't.
Good.
Okay. So that is the center, right around where the cheek is. Okay. What I'm also going to do is make a vertical line that runs through the center. Just making sure it's even. Now, the reason why I would like you guys to use this grid, just to sort of figure out the proportions, figure out the anatomy before we start on color with the color theory aspect of the assignment. And this is probably the most challenging for majority of the foundation students. But for my 112, 113, I do expect them to do this sort of freehand. Okay. But again, for the sake of the demo, what I'm going to do is just sort of work on the grid just so we can get familiar with it in order to sort of break the rules later on. I'm now working with dividing those 4 squares into another 4. It's 1. It's top here, the bottom and the center. Two, and I can see in this corner here where my drawing will be. So that bottom half of that corner will be where the majority of the mouth is. So that also indicates where that is going to be.
Yeah, that'll help a lot because I always struggle with proportion and centering.
Yeah. And this is actually really helpful too. I mean, I do this sometimes when I'm working on a large scale painting, and it really helps me just sort of get my drawing onto the ground of the canvas or the wood that I'm using for my larger scale works, because then I don't have to worry about figuring out if it's going to be proportionally correct, especially when you work larger scale. Okay. So we have sort of a general rule, and I'm also going to make another vertical line right in this center. Do another one here. Now this helps me understand where my general shapes are going to be. And you can see part of what's going to be on the left-hand side are the rocks. And I can add that in there, but it's actually similar to the palette of the wolf itself, to the Arabian wolf. So I'm actually going to leave that last. My primary focus will be looking at the wolf's anatomy first, figuring out the composition, and then where my light source is, which is key, okay? Now, what I would like to do at these stages is sort of now zoom out. Oh, that is, you're right, it does get washed out. Interesting. And then I'm just going to copy the same grid onto my good paper. So let me take my ruler. And again, since I know we have a 24-inch ruler, so the sheet of paper is 25 inches, it's going to be slightly smaller. But if you can just roughly, use an extra piece of paper or use an extra piece of a board or a drawing sheet of paper to kind of fill in the rest, meaning, so for example, if I take my corner here, right, and I'm using my apple green, and obviously towards the bottom, I run out of space here because the ruler is too small. What I can do is just take my sheet of paper, kind of line it up as evenly as possible, and then just make a proportionally correct line. Make sure that is in line. Oh, you know what? Actually, come on. I have another ruler, but if you don't, just in case.
I do have 2 rulers, so I think I can make it work too.
Okay, perfect. Diagonal here, just making sure it doesn't move. The beauty about these rulers is that they have pads on the back, so they don't shift or move, which is great. Making sure that's correct. All right. I'm gonna hold both sides. Just take my apple green. Okay. And do the same thing for the opposite side. And if I'm ever going too fast, if you want me to repeat, just let me know.
All good so far.
Okay, it's tricky because like these rulers are like slightly shifting.
I did appreciate how accurate they were when I was doing the 1-point perspective drawing though, that they weren't moving around on me.
Yeah, no, they're great. I love these rulers. Plus, they're just very versatile to use with anything. I use them to cut tile. I use them to cut wallpaper, to cut my drawings, my paintings, everything. Ready? I'm making. I'm making a vertical line in the center. Just make sure. And then horizontal line. Center here. Just make sure. Start this a little bit. A little faded.
And then these lines don't matter because they'll fade and work into the colors that we're putting over them.
Exactly. There will be all of it will be erased. Again, have my sharpener, sharpen my green pencil. Just leave it on my using the excess sheet of that paper. As my extra trash from my sharpener, so that I can just throw that away very simply, putting it on the side. Now I'm also going to divide these into the halves. So I'm going to use this corner. Sorry, I'm always forgetting my camera. Onto both of these corners. Just make sure that's correct. Here. To right hand side. vertical line. Let's send those. Here. Okay, I have a really good idea now of sort of a general grid that I can use for the actual animal itself, okay? And I also actually forgot on my image, I forgot to add two horizontal lines that run this way, which I can add now. Another one down here, where the nose ends and begins. Roughly. Okay. So now let's get started. So again, using my reference to create the composition, I have it right up top. I'm following along with my actual grid. Let me sharpen my green. Okay. I have it nice and sharp. So again, I'm just really working loosely. I'm not being aggressive. I'm not holding my pencil like this. I'm actually holding it all the way towards the end. Just kind of keeping it really, really gestural, really loose. I don't want to worry too much about the detail. I'm just getting my general composition in. Let's make sure camera's good so you can see. Put my bottom here so I can use. So I'm gonna start off right around where kind of this angle will be. This is where the nose kind of be that side. And right between like halfway towards this. Oh, actually, I completely forgot. I forgot to add another horizontal line on the drawing. Do that now before I forget.
So essentially, we just sort of hold the pencil like we did the ink brush, like toward the end and loosely.
Yes, at these early stages, but later on, when we're refining some of the drawing, we'll make some. If we need to make some changes, we need to hold it in the proper pencil position, just because so we can apply more pressure. Yes, you do need to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot I have to add these ones in there. All right. So, and then right around this square, okay, you can kind of see where the eye socket will be. And that's right around here. That sort of foreshortened socket. And that's right around there. I know it's a little blurry to see at this stage, but I'm going to actually move in my camera a little bit closer because I'm actually just gradually applying a little bit of pressure. Because I want to make these mistakes first in order to then sort of go back and then kind of come around and start to see where I can make some improvements. So here's sort of where the kind of the side of the eyebrows will be. This is sort of where that forehead. This eye here is interesting because it's sort of overlapping where that line will be. It's actually right in there. Actually make some corrections. This is where that socket of the eye will be. Okay. Here is where that sort of the cheeks are. This is actually slightly more towards I'm applying a little bit more pressure so you can start to see where that is. The mouth, the top of the mouth will be. And it's right in here where the nose will be. I'm just making some just generic abstract shapes. So I can then go back and add more sort of refined detail. Mouth sort of ends right about here. That socket comes around. Right in the center of this square on the bottom is where fur is aligned, right around there, and which this side. Now I can start to see where brow, eyebrow, that the first eye will be. Just darkening that side. And then right on towards here is where the top of the side of the ear will be. That side will be. That's where that ear will be. Kind of see where the general shapes within that side will be. And in terms of the framework, making another horizontal line here, then to lower, find out where this eye socket will be. Kind of align it to both sides. I'm actually going to sort of make a series of lines to indicate that's where the fur will be. I can go back and then start refining a little bit more. Nose would probably be right around here. That's where that nose would be. And then I'm just blocking the shape using planar analysis to kind of block, like this will be a medium tone, this will be a lighter tone a little bit later on.
What's planar analysis?
So in terms of planar analysis in oil painting or plein air painting, when you're looking at a landscape, you block in some of these shapes with just general values with color. Let's say, for example, we're looking at the wolf right now. So we have like this area that's whiter, this is sort of middle tone, and hypothetically, this area would be dark. I would just block them in color and then go back and gradually add a little bit more variation. So I'm just taking off my sweater so I can be more movable. And then it's really actually helpful just to do this sort of as a plein air painting, because and again, in plein air painting, we're working from the natural world, looking at a landscape, and you're sort of mapping out where your composition will be, but then you're blocking in like almost as a puzzle to sort of say, okay, here's my light, here's my dark, here's my medium, here's so on and so forth. And then that helps you as a guide then to go back and then start adding more things if you want to, and then actually go back and start to add in more details if you need to. But it sort of generally gets a quick sort of gestural, like a few minutes of just blocking things in. So if we were outside, I would say, okay, guys, we're just doing planar analysis. We're really doing is visualizing our planes, seeing how it is in terms of its distance, and see how far the color is in terms of how close it is. And then we'll talk a little bit more about desaturation when we're making things lighter or bluer on our actual landscapes. But in the same way, because we're looking at this in terms of a color theory lens, we're using planar analysis to kind of indicate where things are, but also looking at the actual sutures of the animal And then we'll go back and start adding some more darks, some more lights. Does that make sense, man?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Of course. I'll send you a little video on that too, because I have that available for my painting class. If you want to see those.
Sure, I like to learn stuff.
So then now I'm now sort of like, again, sectioning off that where that forehead will be. I kind of refined some of the nose. I need to make some erasing marks on this side because it came out too much on my sheet of paper. Where is my eraser? Just to lower this slightly. And I can erase some of my green lines because I don't need them anymore. Just to, again, it was just helping me map out the composition. And then here, notice I'm just making sort of like abstract gestural marks on my side of my pencil. That's where I can then go back and then add in more fur lines with more highlights. And I'm not just sort of drawing it in, I'm just loosely kind of using this as like almost as a brush. And then just really applying a little bit of pressure at a time. This. It's the mouth of that proportion is slightly bigger. Now moving on to these two squares here, you can kind of see parts of the ear of the shadows of those ears are right in here. So I'm just going to make a sort of abstract plein air lock. I'm going to cover it with some value of the apple green, and that will indicate that that will be later on a darker color. And I'm sectioning the ear off, so this side here will be light. I'm not going to apply a layer because I don't need to for a light, but for a middle tone and a dark tone, I like to kind of gradually use my apple green, kind of just make a value because I'm going to blend some of those colors together. And once I add an indigo blue or a brown on those sides, you'll start to see how it blends beautifully with those tones of those apple greens. So my ear starts or ends right about there. And right about here, you can kind of see, it almost seems like this is the cheeks of the wolf. And I'm actually just using these lines to then indicate like this will be separated from middle tone and then dark tone, because this shadow here is really interesting to sort of separate it. There's the under eye. And right about here is interesting because underneath the eye of the animal, it's sort of interesting because like there's a dark shadow here, and then there's a light on that picture plane. And then there's also sort of a middle tone. And then it gradually becomes sort of almost light on this side and then darker on this side. So this side towards my bottom, and I can see here there's more cool colors towards the nostril. I'm going to add a layer of the true blue a little bit later on after this process, which is this color here. Oh, excuse me. This is light Caribbean blue. I need to add true blue, which right here, which is this color. I'm going to add actually a layer on top of that as soon as when I'm done with my darks, to sort of indicate then that will be a cooler light, and this will be a warmer light because I'm going to add some yellow ochre on this side. And it's, again, we're just experimenting with some of these colors. I don't expect you guys to master Prismacolors because I know they take some time to get used to.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I mean, I like to try out new things, but I was like, it's going to take me a while to Google everything. So having some pointers is helpful.
Exactly. Let's actually work together on these early stages so we can find areas in terms of like where we can make mistakes together. And then we can start to evolve it from there. And these are sort of where the hairlines are going to be. And then I can also start adding my back. Now I'm not just making a line towards the back because it's so much hair, which is beautifully like document it in the reference, just sort of going in the same direction of my reference. And I can start to see the hairs almost are kind of rising slightly towards the right. But then towards maybe around this side, they kind of come downwards. And they kind of like morph on the side of the wolf's head, which is really, really important. And it's interesting. So right about here, zoom out slightly. So right about here on this corner, it's going to be mostly black, where that sort of that area is here, which is right around here. Okay. I'm going to leave that blank for as at the moment, and then slowly go back and start refining some of those skills to kind of tighten up the actual wolf's anatomy. So I'm just adjusting my camera, and I apologize for the quality. It's not the best. Let me again just sharpen my pencil, my apple green. Now here, did this make did this make sense in terms of, again, just sort of gritting out the drawing and sort of figuring it out from there?
Oh yeah, it made a lot of sense, and it was nice to sort of watch it happen.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be super useful.
Okay. And how long did this take? This took about what, 20 minutes, would you say? Or like probably less than that?
Something like that, yeah. Not
somewhere around that time.
And I mean, that's the most intimidating part to me, is just getting something situated. Yeah. Like I relax into it after that, so it'll be good.
Okay, good. What I'm now going to do is sort of, I'm going to refine some of the anatomy of the eye because it seems a little too big. Because the wolf's iris, which is right around here, is slightly smaller, and then this side I need to make actually the socket of the eye needs to be a little bit smaller. And I don't want these kind of apple greens to show, because when I go back, I'm actually going to blend in some of those indigo blues to kind of give a nice bright. Some of this area. I'm also going to just remove some of these lines because I don't need them anymore. Again, you can keep them because you can work on top of it, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to erase them because they could be somewhat distracting later on when you add some lights, and you don't want that to conflict. Because I did actually apply a lot of pressure on that side, which I don't need, but it was helpful.
Erasing lines always seems like a magic trick. It's like, ooh, now it's a picture.
Yeah, and it's interesting now I can make a decision whether or not if I'm happy with this composition, if I want to make any changes. If, let's say, for example, to sort of indicate where my light source is, I can then say, wait, okay, so let me turn off the light so we can see it from that angle as well. Can you see that? It's really dark.
I can see it. It's sort of like, I think the light is maybe a little bit better.
Okay. All right, and then now I can sort of then figure out, okay, am I happy with this composition? If so, I'm now going to add some blacks and some darks without using any blacks. So your primary warm base colors are your indigo blue and your, I'm going to actually use a little bit of Tuscan red, and I'm trying to find my brown. Dark brown. So these are your primary darks, okay? And what I would like to do, again, I'm not applying too much pressure, is I'm going to actually go over first my shadows with my indigo blue. And if it's too cool, based on my reference, I can then add a little bit of my dark brown to kind of warm it up, okay? And indigo blue is actually a fantastic color to use. We'll use it multiple times to kind of sort of refine more and more of the drawing throughout the process. So now I'm just going to add the indigo blue. But what I would like to also let you know is a little trick that can help you figure out your colors is to flip your image upside down.
I love flipping images. I've done it with everything we've done so far.
And again, the reason why is because it's sort of almost subconsciously, it forces your mind not to focus too much about the proportions and the anatomy, and really just look at your reference in terms of its color. And you'll start to see a little bit more because our brains are trained to see something from an actual accurate perspective. But by flipping it, it almost tricks the mind to say, oh, wait, there's blues here, there's reds here, there's browns here, and you're only focusing on color. So it actually gives you a little bit more time to breathe and process the color, okay? And I do this a lot in my painting classes too, when we're painting in a large scale, again, just to sort of get that sort of ground covered. So now, for example, I'm gonna actually kind of sort of work around my eye. And I'm just, again, using the indigo blue first. I have a nice sharpened up, ready to go. Applying a little bit of pressure, not too much. Working around my eye is. And now, again, at these stages, what you can do, so for example, where's the image? That's right here. You can take the photo reference, again, flip it, and now I can start, you can zoom in, and I'm working on this side right here, okay? But then you can start to see that underneath these colors, there's blues, there's browns, there's violets, there's yellow ochres. And this is what I need to keep my eye out for. So for example, here, this eyebrow that's been upside down, that's warmer. So I'm using a little bit more blue, excuse me, a little bit more red, a little bit more yellow ochre, a little bit more Tuscan red and brown, dark brown. And then here, there's a combination of blues and warmer colors. So this is really crucial. With the technology that we have nowadays, it's great. So because we can always then go back, zoom in, zoom out, figure out where that colors are, and then slowly, gradually come back to it throughout that process. Let's go back to the drawing. Did that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, that made sense. It was helpful. And I also noticed as soon as you flipped it upside down, I was looking at totally different things.
Oh yeah, because again, subconsciously, it sort of tricks your mind to kind of focus on minute things instead of the entire thing. It sort of makes it much more manageable, and you're not really focused too much about making any mistakes. And I can start to see, for example, the socket is sort of slightly blue, but it's also a little bit of violet. So I'm actually going to add a layer of violet on top of that, because around it's almost a sort of, I'm going to say, goldenrod, which is a sort of lighter color, but then there's also, where's my yellow ochre? There's my Spanish orange I'm going to keep on the side. I'm going to keep a little bit of my violet next to me. And I'm also going to keep, if I can find it, I ran out of yellow ochre. Okay, we'll use my Spanish orange instead as a substitute. So this will be in the socket of my eye, these colors here. I'm going to keep them right next to me. Again, I'm just actually adding just a very, very thin layer of the indigo blue, because I then subconsciously will remember I'm going to go over some of the areas around it with some highlights. So some of those beautiful hairs will go in certain directions around the eye socket, but I also have to remember that that's where that direction will be. And I'm just kind of coming around, working in circular motions. Let me know if I'm going too fast.
Oh, you're good. This is helpful because I wouldn't necessarily have thought to work in circular motions. I don't have a lot of experience drawing fur. I don't have a lot of experience drawing, period, but fur was interesting. I was like, ooh, I got to learn that too.
No, you're doing a great job, Renee. throughout the quarter. You're doing fantastic. I'm gonna.
I think it's been fun.
That's good. Well, I'm glad you're having fun too. I'm adding a little bit of the violet, just a little bit towards like this right-hand side. I'm also going to add a little bit around the iris. Okay. And then a little bit probably around here. Sorry, my vents going off because my the air is sort of cleaning up itself. Okay. I'm now going to take my dark brown. Where's my dark brown? Okay. We'll sharpen it. Again, your sharpener is your best friend at these stages. You really want to take your time, get it nice and sharp because you want to use the side of your Prisma because they're oil-based. Okay.
So you use the side?
Oh, Renee, you broke up. Say that one more time. Renee, do you copy? Renee, your voice is coming slightly in and out.
2 seconds.
Okay. I'm now going slightly over, a little bit around the eye. And I'm just using the side of my pencils to kind of cover more ground. If I start working with the tip, you're going to actually kind of use more of your wrist to kind of cover the ground of the paper. You want to use your side because you can cover more ground of the paper.
So you actually answered my question for me.
Okay.
I just asked why. I asked why you were using the side specifically. So there you go.
Again, it's really actually it also depends on your animal, it depends on your actual reference. Let me start to zoom in slightly more so we can see it better. Okay. So I'm just working on the eye as of the moment. Notice these areas are still dark. I'm gonna put my dark brown on its side. I'm actually gonna add a layer of my apple green around these colors, just a layer, small layer. And notice if once I start to blend those colors and those browns and blues with those violets, they kind of mesh tonally. And at these stages, remember your wolf actually almost looks like a neon, brightly colored animal. So that's okay. Because at these stages, you're trying to just, again, block out some of these colors. Because we're layering on top of each other. So we have to think about it in terms of a dissection, meaning if like, for example, if we take the reference and we're sort of dissecting each color throughout the lens of the reference. And again, you can do this with your camera or in your computer, which is going to be much more easier. Try to gradually look at it, take your time, sort of process how it looks, process what the reference is from the image, and then slowly start gradually adding layers on top of it. And it just takes some practice. I'm now taking a little bit of that golden rod and kind of correcting the anatomy over the apple green of my eye socket. And notice I added some of those violets and those indigo blues. So that's a lot of color that's coming up. So I'm adding more pressure. Oh, and then Renee, if you want to, do you want a copy of this reference? I can send it to you just in case, if you want to practice with it.
Maybe, yeah.
Now I'm also going to take my indigo blue and start to just kind of tighten some of this area here. Add a little bit more background. Make it less cool. I want to keep it a warm dark color, not a cool dark color.
I'm requesting to join Zoom from my computer just so I can see it on the larger screen.
Oh, okay.
It's just me twice.
Okay. But now I'm going to take my Spanish orange. There. Over my apple green. And that's so almost again, tonally makes it much more manageable. And meshes beautifully together. Because around that, I want to keep a nice sort of bright. So I'm actually going to go back to my palette and use a little bit of Parma Violet, which is sort of this color here. And I'm going to make highlight on this side here, almost around the socket, and blend in some of the eyelets on that side. And then later on, in those later stages, again, I'm just working on the eye. I'm going to finally then add my brightest whites, which is my white. Just gradually start highlighting. Socket. You don't want to add too much, and this is where I see students get overwhelmed with the white because it's so bright. Start to see almost the eyelash underneath that socket, but I'm going to go back and add a little bit of pink, because you can kind of see on this top side there's some pink, and I'm going to go over with my white. Because I don't want my white to kind of dominate my colors. I want it to be a highlight. Notice now I'm adding some lines with my pink. Can you see that? Renee?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Here, notice I'm following the hairlines. This is pink I'm using. And I'm going to put that on my side. I'm going to take my Spanish orange. Notice I'm working around the eye. And I'm going to take this probably takes the most time. This is like towards the final or the middle tone layers. And now take my golden rod. And those colors together. Going over those areas here. I'm going to take some of the violets, the Parma violets. And I love the sort of almost gray color that you start to create on those surfaces. All the layers that we added before. Then I'm gonna actually add some true blue on this area.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, especially in these early stages, it's like, it's so strange to think about these colors, but then when we go back, we start adding some lights. Now, for example, like towards the final stages, I'll go back with my white. I'm just gonna sharpen it. Make sure there's no other colors underneath that white, because I don't want some of the colors I had prior when I was using it to blend with these colors, but then if you want to. Let's see how bright that is. Find just a little bit of pressure. But it's all of those colors that we need prior. Sorry, I'm just trying to blow up some excess. So it came up. All of these colors will then mesh tonally. Here. I can warm that up. I'm going to actually add a little bit of that Spanish orange. Top here. Again, really following my lines. Those highlights are. Just again, just taking my time. Not worrying about any details yet. This actually allows me to sort of edit down some of the colors. If I want to go back, adding a shadow, for example, I can. So, for example, if I wanted to go back and add some shadows on this side, take my brown and start just blending some of those areas in. It's like my indigo. Now it's playing how much pressure you want to add. Really take your time, because now it's layered on top of those colors. So if I apply more pressure, these tonal variations blend beautifully. Start adding some of that. Renee, any questions so far?
No, I'm just kind of watching this in amazement. It's fun watching things blend together.
It really, you'll start to kind of see an interesting, almost bizarre chemical reaction once things blend.
Right.
Which is interesting, because then you can start to say, you know, if it's working, if it's not, you can make some changes. And this all varies, again, depending on everybody's animals and then everybody's concepts. If you want to make it more lifelike, if you want to make it more abstract, it really just depends. So I'm not looking at my camera, so I don't know what's going on. Let's see what happens once we flip it. We'll hold all those colors we used. So you can kind of see, I'm just zoom out slightly.
Right.
Where those highlights are. Again, it's very, very strange at this stage. Oops, sorry.
Okay.
What happened? Oh, hold on, let me go back to my Zoom. Are we back up?
Yeah, you're all good. I also like that it looks like there's a tiny bird that lives in this wolf.
Yeah. So then now you can start to see, now if I zoom in, those color variations are really strange. We have those cools on the bottom and then those warms up top. But notice how bright that white is.
Right.
If you do not want to keep it that bright, again, I just did it for the sake of the demo. You really want to gradually add those tonal variations towards the end of the drawing, because you really want to just sort of take your time.
Okay.
This is a sort of the palette that I used.
Okay.
So these were the sort of color variations. Did this make sense?
Yeah, it made sense. It was helpful.
Perfect. Now I can keep working it now. We have Abraham in here. I can bring him in here. All right.
Okay.
So then now, again, we worked on just a partial half, one side of the drawing. But now if you want to then kind of start in the preliminary layering process with just by covering up the values. And this is again going back to kind of talking about plein air, taking my indigo blue, and I'm just roughly, I have my image reference next to me, then just sort of going back and starting to add more variants of those the darks. But I also want to add just a small layer of the apple green to kind of blend, because I don't want it to look too dark yet, because I'm going to add more pressure a little bit later on. So I'm actually, again, using the side of my apple green, kind of gradually, kind of almost using that as a middle tone, but it actually will keep as a reference to a dark. So meaning like this area will all be dark later on in the drawing.
Yeah, I like that technique. That's useful.
Yeah. Because then it helps you as a guide, and you can go back and then start adding some more darks or lights, depending on if you want to keep it on that side. And right about here, and I notice the nose is roughly almost pitch black, but I want to keep a nice sort of indicator. There's that highlight on the tip of the nose. And then just in case, let me minimize this. Where's the chat feature? Here it is. I'm going to send the animal.
Perfect.
Chat. So if you want to use it, you have a copy. Okay. And then let's talk a little bit about the mouth. So I'm going to actually add a value of the apple green, kind of really roughly to cover in that area. But then now what I would like to do is, again, I'm going to take my indigo blue, kind of cover the nose using the side, again, covering more ground. When I say ground, it's always referring to the paper or the surface that we're working with, which is the paper. I'm now going to go back and actually add a layer of the true blue. I'm going to take my sharpener. Abraham, welcome, by the way. I know we had an appointment on Tuesday. We completely missed it. I do apologize in advance, but we can definitely talk one-on-one a little bit later on if you want to have a chat. So now I'm going to use the true blue. I'm going to make a layer. Anytime when I talk about a layer, it's sort of a wash, a gradual, light pressured amount of your Prisma. Right down here. And you can see when I from that reference, on this area, it almost seems cooler. But when I go back and actually then go back and let's say, for example, pull up the reference on my computer. I can multitask on that side. When I then go back and add in some of the brown, right around here, there's that kind of a dark shadow. But then on the tip or on the base of where the mouth is, there's a highlight. And I know that subconsciously, the left side will be where the light source is coming from, obviously, because that's where you have these highlights, you have the other highlights over there. But I also have to sort of indicate that that side will also be a slight dark So I'm just using my dark brown, just kind of make another kind of abstract plein air block of color. And then now I'm going to take my Spanish orange, okay, because it's a warm color around that side. I'm going over that line that we made with the apple green to indicate that that's where that highlight will be, because on this side, on the bottom of the main, it's almost whiter and a lot brighter. Abraham, do you had a question? Sorry, I just saw your hand. Abraham, do you copy?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just had a quick question. So we missed our meeting. What time does this end? So I can come back?
We're gonna probably end around, what time is it right now? 7:12, probably around 8.
Okay, can I come like around like 7:50 and talk about
Yeah,
meeting?
I know, because we have to talk a little bit more one-on-one.
Okay.
Let me finish up here and then we'll say, Renee, how does 7:30 sound?
Whatever time works for you. I'm just here to absorb what you have time for.
Okay, let's Abraham, let's do it 7:30.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect.
7:30. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. And now I'm just adding a little bit of the light here. Again, you can kind of gradually see where those colors will be, always thinking about what's underneath the fur. I know it's a little strange. That's why it's always really important to get a high resolution image. Obviously, this is printed just to sort of figure out the grid, but you don't need to necessarily worry too much about your printed image if it's black and white. What you need to worry about is having a good quality image on your computer. Then you can zoom in and zoom out to sort of figure out where those colors are. Matting the whiskers last, the wolf's whiskers. Okay. Then now I'm going to add a little bit. Where's the violet? Okay. I have another violet. I'm going to use a little bit of the. Actually, no. I'm going to use just violet. Yeah, the violet's more than enough. Now you can kind of see, based on the reference, there's this interesting plane right around here. It's almost like a V-shaped composition. It's a little bit more violet-y. So I'm going to actually add a layer of the violet. And around that area towards the left side of the nose, kind of comes in and then comes out. And then I'm going to take my indigo, and I'm slightly kind of keeping in mind how much indigo I actually add. But let me zoom in, I'm sorry, so you can see that better. Is that better? Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Now fixing the composition, kind of refining some of those lines, I'm adding a little bit more pressure. Sorry, I just hit, I have a tendency to hit the camera with the pencil.
I would too. I opened the image and I have it next to you drawing, and it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, good. As long as it's helpful.
Yeah, it is.
Now you can start to see on this side here, there's a little bit more violet. There's also the kind of where this area of the nose almost becomes pitch black. But I add a little bit of the more darker brown to highlight this violet layer. And then I'm going to leave that side when I work more upside down, because I need to refine some of the darker spot. Like there's these interesting spots that kind of come around here, kind of come around where the whiskers are. There's also a darker area layer here where the nose will be. And this area is almost where the pitch white of that highlight will be. So rather than keeping it just sort of pitch white, I'm actually going to actually go back and add some of the goldenrod on top of it, just to sort of warm it up. Adding a layer over that. Notice I'm going in circular directions.
Okay.
Because if I then go back, then add a little bit of the bright white, and I'm going to add just a little bit of pressure, just a little bit, not too much.
Huh.
It almost becomes like sort of a gray. Do you see that?
Yeah.
mindful about the reference. But then if I'm just going to say, for the sake of the demo, I'm going to go over it with the blue. You can see that blue change into a stranger, lighter
Oh
blue.
yeah, that's fun.
But then I also have to be mindful that color is still on my sharpener. So I'm going to erase that.
Right, so sharpen it and take it off.
Exactly, because you don't want that color to blend within the other light.
Okay.
I'm actually going to add some little spikes of the hair to sort of show that that's where the hair will be, to not just sort of have a kind of even line. Right around here, it's pretty even. But then almost there's another highlight right around here. Come around. And then right around here is where the other side of the hairs will begin. Now it's going over that Spanish orange that we added. So we get a nice highlight. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And again, I apologize. The camera is not the best quality.
Oh no, it's fine. I can see.
And you can kind of see here, it almost becomes sort of now violet. So now I'm going to add a little bit of a layer underneath that with some violet. Notice if I go over it, it almost becomes a brown, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's mixing with that Spanish orange and the golden oak colors. But then let's say, for example, before I get into my bright white, I'm actually going to add a little bit of my pink to kind of work as a middle tone. Because the pink is really, really bright. And it almost again neutralizes some of those apple greens. It becomes a sort of a muddy gray, which is great. Because when I go over this area with some highlights, you'll start to see this really interesting color combination. And right around here, it's just almost sort of like an almond shaped hair, which is interesting.
Right.
And I want to also indicate that because again, we're trying to follow along the hairlines. Again, the wolf is extremely intricate, but beautifully rendered. It's a fascinating animal.
It is. I was kind of excited. It wasn't necessarily something I would have chosen as my first choice, but it was definitely top tier. And it felt like something that would be interesting to draw.
Yeah. A little bit more pink on this side. I'm gonna go back with some white. So then now, put my pink on the side. I'm gonna go over it with some lights. I'm gonna try to go directly over those pinks. You can see they blend with the violet. And you almost have an interesting color relationship happen. And then this is a little bit later on towards the end of the drawing. You know, at these stages, this is probably the middle tone, light tones, where you don't need to add too much pressure, or you don't need to add too much of the white. You really want to be using the color, all the colors to make a bright. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Again, usually this class is designed, and when I started here at Central a few years back in 2018, to be twice a week. So we'd have more time in the studios, but obviously COVID hasn't been the greatest of helps.
I know, and I would totally come by the studio. I just have to work during class hours.
Oh, no, no worries. It's okay. As long as you have enough time to work at home. But I'm also then now going to go back and add a little bit of my true blue, kind of blend in some of these areas.
I also like how it's defining where the light's coming from as you're going.
Exactly. So I'm kind of working reversely and kind of fast forwarding just so we can get the ideas down in terms of how we start, how we begin. and then so on and so forth. Now I could, in theory, you could take a blending tool if you would like. The blending tool looks like a nude color. Okay, this is sort of sharpened on both sides, just so I can blend on one side, and I can just flip it. I can blend it on this side. I did get some ink on here, unfortunately. I could blend all these colors together, but what I don't want to happen is that sort of muddy sort of value of a gray, because I want those textures of the hair to come up onto that surface. So if I'm adding more darks or lights, it's not going to sort of get washed out. The blending is a good option for any reptiles or any scaly skins.
Okay.
And now I can slowly, gradually work my way down and arching my, and again, I'll do this with more Spanish orange, a little bit of pink later on, but just for this side. Applying a little bit more pressure and see how much brighter that becomes. I don't want to blend too much of those areas. I also just want to keep that bright enough. There's a whole variety of colors I can use. Let's zoom out slightly. I know it looks a little strange at these stages, but now I have a sort of a general shape of where this area will be in relationship to the wolf, because it will be highly contrasted the more and more I start adding my darks. That's why it's always important to add darks first and then gradually work your way up to middle tones and to the lights. Any questions so far?
No, this is very helpful.
Okay. I'm gonna keep going. Add some more browns to kind of make this more. A bit of indigo blue, which kind of darken that side. Indigo blue is a fantastic color because always you can always go back, start refining some of those shadows. I'm also going to take some of my pinks just to make a little bit of those highlights where the nose will be. And it's really, again, it's a process of elimination to see what colors will work best, and seeing how they react to the tone sheet of paper. Spanish orange.
And then you were talking about making a color grid just like on the back of the piece of paper.
Yes. So if you can try.
I bought 2 pieces of paper, so I have one in case I mess up, but I could do a grid on the back of the second one.
Yes. Let me grab. So I'm trying to grab the other sheet of paper. So what I did on this back sheet, again, just to sort of help filter out this process, is again taking a variety of some of the colors, blending them together, some with a spike, some with a kind of crosshatch, zigzag, a variety of different approaches, using a paper towel, more pressure, less pressure. And I saw how each of them reacted. And this almost helped as a guide to tell me, okay, what would be the best color for the for the animal? And then going back and slowly sort of, again, process of elimination. Would this be a good violet? Would this be a good light or middle, and then so on and so forth. It's really helpful. It's tremendously useful, especially with sort of just getting familiar with the Prismas. Try to limit yourself if you can by not using all of your colors. Try to use a limited palette. But then what I would do if I were you is use the back as almost like a sort of a thumbnail. So make sort of 6 drawings, very small, like probably 3 inches wide, 5 inches tall. Like probably 6 boxes, and time yourself and say, okay, how quickly can I do this in 5 minutes and 10 minutes and 30 minutes? 30 seconds, 10 seconds, or excuse me, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And then you almost use, again, process of elimination of saying what is important, getting my grounds there, getting my composition there, getting my color palettes, so on and so forth. And then again, working upside down. So again, just flip the image, the orientation, and then you'll be able to then use that as a guide. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I've used the color swatching and testing for every project we've done thus far, and it's been exceedingly helpful. So I figured I would absolutely have to do it with this one too.
Yeah, I think part of this assignment is just really getting familiar with the materials. And,
yeah.
And this is in a whole nother window of colors that of a new material throughout the quarter that we haven't discovered yet. That's why I always like to give you guys a little bit more time. Usually this takes the most amount of time throughout the quarter, but ideally, again, if you do need more time, feel free. If you need to send me an email, we can talk more one-on-one. But if not, just work at your own pace gradually. Don't rush this process. I really want you to sort of have fun with it. And again, I'm glad that you are, but also learn from what you've adapted through the entire quarter to sort of see how I can figure out where the light source is, where my composition is, and then that will help you as a guide to kind of indicate where things are.
Right.
Throughout this assignment. We have about another 3 minutes left before I talk to Abraham. Do you have any other questions or concerns?
I'm trying to think. How would you show me how you would do the whiskers at the end?
Yes.
So I know you wouldn't do them till the end, but how would you do that?
In theory, like if I had, I'm going to use the white. You're going to go over this. Because then this color would be a lot lighter.
Yeah.
It's always easier said than done because like, we'll just say hypothetically, I need it a little bit more brighter than that. So I'm adding a little bit more pressure. That's extremely horrible, but you get the idea.
I do.
I would actually, since they're really dark, I would press my indigo blue. Zoom in. Press my indigo blue and sort of, again, just follow along where the whiskers are. So I would, with a very aggressive gesture, arch my actual pencil and then do the same thing. And then do the same thing. And then do the same thing. And then that will hopefully build upon a nice sort of balance of a whisker. Obviously, it doesn't look great now. It's a little bit hard to see because it's really, really dramatic for that white and indigo. But you will build upon those layers and slowly add more pressure for those rich blacks, because you can kind of see in the image, it's really thin. So right. I would actually sharpen your indigo and kind of use the tip and then use it as an angle, probably like at 45, and kind of like just very quickly make that sort of mark. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That was exactly the sort of thing, because it's such a fine line, you know, and they're not perfect. And so the extra addition of the 45-degree angle sharpened is a good tip.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my